We supposed to hear anything?
Yes, and actually we are live on Growth Impact Stage, and I'm really thrilled for this panel with all my Israeli panelists here on the line. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
We can hear you well.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so here we
Okay.
are talking about Israel Startup Nation, and on my panel I have the pleasure to have Itai Green, founder and CEO of Innovate Israel, Cecile Blilious, head of impact and sustainability at Pitango Venture, Ariel Sacerdoti, founding partner at the Founders Kitchen, and Barak Singer, CEO of Trendlines Incubator Israel. So guys, welcome all. Please, can you introduce yourself first? So we'll start with Cecile.
Sure. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Cecile Blilious. I'm the head of impact and sustainability for Pitango Venture Capital. It's Israel's largest venture capital. It has about $2.5 billion under management, investing across early stage healthcare and growth, and adapting and adopting the ideas and methodologies of impact and ESG into a mainstream VC. I'm also the founder and chairperson of GITA, the Global Impact Tech Alliance, which is a new nonprofit that aims to connect all the impact tech practitioners around the world and give them a home to grow in so that we can scale this market.
And we'll definitely hear more about it. Itai, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi everyone. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I at Innovate Israel, which helps corporate to innovate with third parties, like Academy, like other companies, and mostly with startups.
Thank you very much. Ariel.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Thanks for having me. You know, as an entrepreneur myself, after 30 years or so of going at it, I joined forces with my childhood friend, Uri Levine, better known for Waze and Move It and many other great companies. And we decided to leverage on our joint experience and start a company builder, which is a little bit of a unique animal in the Israeli scene. We follow a simple methodology of we adopt the PCM. It's follow the problem, the CEO, and the mentoring. These are the three key ingredients. We have the prerogative of doing only good, of what we think is good. So we shy away from many things that are even borderline. And obviously we try to do well. This often goes together. The idea is to join forces with exceptional young entrepreneurs that Israel has plenty of, and give them perhaps the only thing that they crave, which is that depth of experience, of international experience that they still don't have under their belt yet. And the only goal stays and remains to make a bigger impact on the world around us.
Perfect. Let's make an impact together. Barak.
Hi, so thank you. It's a pleasure of being here. I'm the CEO of the Trendlines Incubator. We are part of the Trendlines group. Trendlines is an Israeli company that invests in two areas. One is agri-food and the other is medical devices. Our vision is helping the human condition, and this is why we choose these two industries. We make our investment to our incubators in fund. We have both in Israel and in Singapore. And because of that, you know, this is another reason why this panel is of interest for us, is that beside the impact and helping the human condition, we are very active. We are an Israeli company, but we are very active in Asia. We have an office in Singapore. We are doing a lot of cross-border transactions. So this geography is very relevant for us.
And we'll discuss more about collaboration between Israel and Asia as well. So Ariel, as you mentioned, you started the Founders Kitchen with Uri Levin, the founder of Waze, which got acquired by Google in 2013 for $1.3 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And you're really nurturing from the ground entrepreneurs, I guess, to have a more homegrown Israeli unicorns. So, you know, we hear a lot about Israel as being a startup nation. And what common traits do you see from Israeli entrepreneur, and which part are you trying to develop further?
Well, it's a loaded question. We can only go by our own experience. I'm lucky enough to have a partner with two unicorns under his belt, which is something quite unique. But we have to understand, and the people on the panel here, I'm sure, are familiar with it. Israelis have some sort of an islander mentality. Okay, we are landlocked. We live in an objectively tough neighborhood. So it is something that develops some strength of you have to make it on your own, and this is very important. There is a loyalty, I think, that is somewhat different than what you can see in other parts of the world. It's part of this tribal feeling of belonging, of being together, of us against the world, being a little bit of the underdog, if you wish, and that is very helpful. This is a good dose of humbleness, I think, that is very, very important. And the country is small, okay? Networking is very, very efficient. Within 2 or 3 degrees of separation, you can get to anybody from your army circles, previous jobs, university circles, and this is very, very, very helpful. We see three main, I guess, pillars of this ecosystem that works very well. First is the government. We all like to complain about the government, but we have to admit that governments are doing some important things. The government of Israel started decades ago to foster a very favorable investment environment for foreign investors, and this has worked very, very well, bringing a lot of money. That is, at the end of the day, the first ingredient that you need to do just about anything. The second one, I think, again, it goes back to the culture. There is Israeli has a culture, unlike other parts of the world, where failure is looked down upon. In Israel, you can fail and you can be proud of it. Okay, failure is trying, failure is learning, and as the old adage says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Right, so you are encouraged to take shots even if you miss them once in a while, and this is very, very important, because in other parts of the world, this is really, I think, blocking a lot of energy that people are just afraid to start. Just to say one anecdote, VCs are looking upon CEOs that fail, for example, that start again with the second or third initiatives, are looked upon as people with experience, even if the first run around was not necessarily successful. Much better than a first-time CEO that still thinks that the world is easy and building startups is really a walk in the park. So, when we were kids, maybe we wanted to be lawyers or doctors, or maybe our parents wanted us to be that. Today, young kids in Israel, they want to be an entrepreneur. They want to make it big. They think that is the best way to make an impact in the world. And this is something very, very fundamental. The third leg I touched briefly earlier is the military. Okay, the military, other than doing what it has to do in this context, is the ultimate educational institution of the country, and this is something very, very unique to this country. The draft is mandatory for men and women for a number of years, so the military has the opportunity to pick and choose the best of the best of the best. And like in every type of filtering system, when you have a large, we like to call it at the beginning of the funnel, right? You can narrow it down to really get the best of the best. And this is something that is clear. The service is short, so you have to get very quickly on board, and you train people that go out of the military 2, 3, 4 years later. They go out with an experience level that is absolutely second to none. At young age, you get responsibilities which are arguably way higher than your experience, and this is something that most good people really react well with, either because you were in a technological unit and you get exposed to technologies that nobody at your age group doesn't even know that exist in the world. Obviously, 5 years later, you're the one that has experience with that, or because you are in a combat unit and you develop leadership skills, which are very, very unique, which are just as important 5 years later when you are a young CEO going through the typical roller coaster of a different type of combat. You can use these skills. So for me, these are the three key pillars that I see in the Israeli ecosystem.
So I would say like the US, try and fail fast, the French way of criticizing the government, and a little bit of Hong Kong as being a really, a small place. You need to think about scaling from day one, but the unique kind of part of military part on top of it. And Cecile, as one of the biggest investor, actually, what are you looking for in terms of entrepreneurs, and are you investing mostly into Israeli companies that are scaling out of Israel?
Yeah, so like you very well said, Israeli startups, Israel is a small market, like Ariel said, and no startup in Israel is founded to serve the Israeli market only. We are international and global by design, and hence all the startups that are born here are all looking at different markets. Unfortunately, they're looking more at the US market still. Sometimes the Asian market is growing, but it's not as dominant as the US market. Also for obvious reasons that most of the exits were done towards US-based companies. So that's where the focus is, but that's a mistake in my view, and we need to fix that. The Israeli VCs are mostly investing in Israeli startups, so are we. But we do have discretion to invest outside of Israel, which we do. And if you look at the portfolio of Pitango, you'll see that there are companies that are located outside of Israel, but many of them
What do you think, sorry to interrupt, but what do you think is the ratio actually that you have in terms of investing outside of Israel?
I think it's a Pareto sort of 80-20 ratio, more or less.
Thank you.
Yeah, something like that. But it's really about the opportunity, getting the real opportunity on board. Many of these companies also that are outside of Israel do have an Israeli connection. Sometimes it's an Israeli entrepreneur, sometimes it's an R&D center in Israel, sometimes. So there is a Israel relation of sorts. And the nice thing about, well, I just joined Pitango as head of impact a few months ago, and my job is to start looking at how we can migrate the entrepreneurs that are already in the Pitango portfolio, and how do we draw new entrepreneurs and new companies to approach us when they have amazing technology, amazing teams, amazing themes, and of course, a high and measurable impact. And by that, I mean, we're trying to see, first of all, that we can implement the methodologies of ESG. So we'd like all the companies to be compliant with environment, social, and governance metrics, which are just even at the very least, they're reducing risks. So this is a very clear methodology that helps reduce the risks of investing in dangerous companies or toxic companies, which we've seen in the past in other places. But we want to go beyond that, and we want to encourage our companies to be more inclusive, more diverse, more responsible towards the planet, more responsible towards the community, see how they source material if they have material to source, and so establish like on a positive side, not necessarily just negative screening. Next to that, we're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are our guidelines, and seeing which of the companies actually are addressing one of these indicators within these 17 goals. And we'd like to help them migrate into understanding what that means. So Ariel said it very nicely when he introduced his activity with Uri, that of course they'd like to do good and they'd like to invest in companies that are creating a positive impact. We want to go even beyond by saying, okay, wanting and having that passion is very important, and that's key actually. But you also have to act very responsibly and measure and make sure that you have clear KPIs of the mission that you're serving, which is what your product and business model are serving. So it's not like an additional hurdle on the company, but instead it is the company and it is the DNA of the company. And these are the entrepreneurs that we want to draw in, the ones that maybe don't even know about the SDGs, maybe they do, but they don't think it's related to their business, or maybe they know about it and they care about the cause that they're trying to serve, and they believe that they can build a really good business around that cause, but maybe they haven't spoken about it out loud because they thought that their investors might think that they will compromise on their financial returns because they're doing something good for society or for the planet. And we are debunking that. So come to us. This is the idea. We want to invest in companies that have these double bottom lines, that have the ability to serve a big cause that is a big market with an excellent team that we can mentor and help them get to where they're going. And the better and the more successful they are, the more impact they'll make.
Yes, and we talked actually a lot about SDG as a Startup Impact Summit. This is quite the theme for the conference. So, and I recognize all the colors actually behind you that are also all over our website. And I think that's great and that's really interesting. You say as well that you want to move investment into impact investing from 1 billion in 2019 to about 50 billion in 2030. And I wanted to ask you first, and don't worry for the other panelists, I'll get back to all of you, but I wanted to ask you first, at what stage do you think the entrepreneurs should, implement it, take it into account? And I'm not talking only about their mission and their vision, but it's really about how to measure it and how are you helping them and what do you expect from them, depending on the stage of development they are, because it's usually, at the beginning also a small team that is already spending most of their time, if it's not 200% of their time, just really developing and scaling their business.
Yeah, so actually it's a very good question, because people tend to think that when you're in the trenches and you're fighting for your life and you're building a small startup, then you don't have time or the luxury to think about these other components. But actually, if you don't think about them when you get started, then it's not going to be embedded in your DNA. So even on the small scale, so when you have a very early stage startup that has maybe 2 entrepreneurs, an idea, a good mentor, an angel investor who gave them some capital, or they're bootstrapping and they're off, to their road, they should be aware of the fact that when they build their management team, they should have women included and their team should be diverse. They should be aware of the fact that whatever they do has an environmental cost. And it's not a big deal to just implement these methodologies and understand what that means for them and how they tweak their product. And it's actually going to provide them with a much more focused business case and go to market when they understand what their product and what their solution is going to solve in terms of the social or environmental lens. So it's not a different problem that they're addressing. It's just another way of looking at it. And we as the investors can very much help them in verbalizing this and understanding this. And trust me, it's going to help them retain the best talent, and the best people will stay on and will be totally dedicated. The productivity of the people is going to grow, and eventually they'll be able to attract capital that they wouldn't be able to attract otherwise. So I think it's nothing but good outcomes. Now, with later stage or even growth companies that are already very entrenched in the market, and even the ones that already have reached the unicorn status, this is when it's not about dreaming of the impact that you're making. It's about actually looking at what you've done and seeing how does that relate to the social and environmental problems that our society is facing. So, and when you take that combined with the original intention of the founders, and you see that these people really set up this company to do some good, and you can understand or color the KPIs that they were already approaching into the SDGs and categorize them and understand them, you can look back at what they've done already and measure that. Now, the very important thing, the 2 important things that I want to mention. One is that you have to look at outcome-based, not outputs. So it's not enough to sell something to a user that may be a farmer and he's going to be using your agtech solution. Because if the outcome is not counted, that maybe he's using it, but there's actually no increase in yields or no a better use of fertilizers or pesticides. So actually the outcome is what you want to count. And number 2 is that you have to think about the net impact. So you always have to look at the negative impact. Everybody has a negative impact. It can be small or big, but there is one. You have to look at it, understand what that means for your stakeholders, and address it. And then you can really calculate your net impact. So it doesn't matter which size of the company there is. We have the methodology built for early stage, for mid-size, and for unicorns. It doesn't matter. It's totally possible to build it as an impact native company, so starting from scratch, and it's totally possible to migrate into impact when you're a unicorn, all across the board.
Okay, so, and if you have more question about it, I really recommend all of you to go to Global Impact Tech Alliance website for also more details, guideline about it. Barak, I would like to switch to you actually, as you know, your incubator focus on innovation-based medical and agricultural technologies. You know, are startups focusing enough on sustainability from what you see?
Well, the situation is that, you know, when we made our investment a few years ago, no one thought about it. I think it's kind of new. But I can say that these days, for example, we are looking at our entire portfolio, checking how they affect the environment, checking all these new elements and calculation of how they are helping. And you will see more and more, especially on our agriculture side, companies that part of their pitch, although when we make the investment, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, it wasn't part of the equation looking at what we are doing for sustainability. But on these days, our CEOs are focused. They are looking, they are checking the different index. And in many cases, you will even see it in the first or second slide of the pitch. We are into sustainability. We help it, and in some way, it's not, you know, you have some clear cuts. If you have a startup that is, you know, this is its goal, it's easy. But they learn, even if it's not direct impact, if we are in some way helping the growth, do it differently, use less thing to grow and use it in the office and less warming and things like that. So it's becoming more and more part of the pitch. It's easier to find it on the agri-food side of our business, but we are now also looking on our medical companies and try to see, it's more complicated, but try to see that how we can help the environment, even with having things that will make the hospital, you know, be much friendlier.
And Itai, I have not forgotten about you. So you're working mainly, you know, for open innovation, which is large corporates. Do you see much more interest, especially over the last year, related to impact investment? And is this something that they actually think about when they are looking at 10 companies and at investment and collaboration?
Corporations are looking first to improve their activity. So to be more efficient, to bring more value to their clients. But absolutely, when you want to bring more value to your clients, you also need to create some impact. So definitely more and more corporations are looking into this impact as a challenge, as something they want to invest in, to collaborate with such startups. I can tell you that just before the COVID-19 came to our life, I was in a meeting between an airliner in Europe and a great startup in Israel that is in the impact field called Travaxi. I don't know if Ariel and Cecile are familiar with, but this startup is really one that creates a huge impact globally. It helps handicapped people to travel. And when for non-handicapped people like us, it takes X hours to prepare our next trip. For handicapped people, it takes 10X or even more time to invest in preparation of their next trip. So this startup that I was working with and helping to work with that giant airliner in Europe is really helping this process to be much more simple than it is today.
And Barak, you know, you're working a lot actually with Singapore. And, you know, we're talking about Israel and something from Hong Kong to scale from day one. Can you let us know more about this collaboration and the common things you see between like Israel and Asia?
For us, Asia, we look at it in two different directions. One direction is our activity in Singapore. Basically, we opened an incubator in Singapore for the medical field. It was 3 years ago. This was our first move into Singapore together with an IPO. We went public in the Singapore Stock Exchange. And as a general strategy, it was for us, because we knew the importance of Asia, we thought that Singapore is a good place, you know, very Western and gateway to Asia. So we started there. And in the incubator, we are doing there something which is very similar to what we are doing in Israel. We are looking for very early stage technologies from Singapore. We are both in Israel and in Singapore, we are working with the government. In Israel is the Israel Innovation Authority that, as Ariel said, we have a lot of criticism to the government, but I think the government in the high-tech sector in Israel doing tremendously. And the same is in Singapore. The Enterprise Singapore, which is the similar entity in Singapore, is really an excellent partner for us, and they wanted us to be in Singapore. A combination of bringing the Israeli spirit, as my colleagues spoke here, this is something very unique about Israel, that every one of three people want to be entrepreneur, want to lead, think out of the box. So it's not in every geography like that. So I think this is part of what we bring to that place. And the day-to-day work that we are doing, it's quite as similar as we do in Israel. We find interesting technology from entrepreneur in Singapore, from hospital. We make an investment. They are located in our offices for a long time because we have a hands-on approach. And then we are growing companies. And the same in Singapore and Israel, we are looking at global markets. We, as my colleague said, Israel is a small country, Singapore is a small country, so the startups are looking outside. So this is part of the work that we are doing in Singapore. And now on the agri-food side, we also have a fund that is based in Singapore and invest in startup in Singapore, but also in startups globally. So this is one of our activity, which is cross-border. In addition to that, like every startup in Israel, we have a lot of innovation in Israel. We have great companies, but on the other hand, Israel is a tiny place. No company is interested in selling in the end of the day in Israel. We are always aiming at the US, at Europe, China, Brazil, places like that. So part of the work that we are doing with other places in Asia as well is finding collaboration and finding investors, usually with the concept of, on one hand, we are bringing a lot of investment from foreign investors in Asia that invest in our portfolio companies. And on the other hand, 10 years ago, most Israeli companies were looking mainly for the financing element of investor from Asia. These days, we understand that the market are very, very important. So we prefer to find someone that, for example, can help us in get regulatory approval in those geographies, or making a collaboration agreement in order to penetrate a market in Asia. So for us, it's important because it's built in our ecosystem that we need all the time to work on geographies which are far from Israel. This is our market. And on the other hand, we need more capital and more collaboration with strategic companies, because again, on one hand, we had a lot of innovation in Israel. On the other hand, financial resources and geography-wise, we are a very small country.
Yeah, it's true that we are often talking about Israeli companies scaling, but not outside companies coming to Israel, actually. Ariel, as you are fostering, companies to the way up, where do you see the first market they tackle? Do you see it as the US first, and do you think that might be the cleverest thing to do?
Well, there is many clever things to do, and there is no yes, no answer, I think. But I can tell you that from our experience, we like to say, there's a tendency, I think Barak mentioned that, to go to the US or the UK, to go to what I call an A country, okay? And that is very, very natural. We often recommend our entrepreneurs to actually start in Israel and really do your product market fit, a lot of the exercise, and do them locally for a number of reasons. Okay, it's a lot faster, it's a lot cheaper. Obviously, there is no language barrier, cultural barriers. But maybe the most important thing is that once you start to figure out and you are more mature to pick a country, all the errors that you have made, you can leave behind, okay? When you start in Germany and you want to cross the border into France, the border is very porous, okay? When you start from Israel and you go to the other side of the world, nobody remembers, nobody knows. These are different users. They don't talk to each other. So it's a great way to sort of practice a little bit before you go on the main stage. And once you have to pick a stage, I would say young startups do not have the luxury of making a big mistake, okay? They have to go from one gas station to the next, okay? From one founding round to the next. And they have to show important accomplishments in order to make the next round. So if I went to Georgia or Louisiana or even California and I failed, I'm done, okay? That's it. But if I pick a B country that may be very, very significant and large, for example, somebody mentioned Brazil or India or Indonesia, these are very, very large economies. And often those are blue oceans. You have no competition. The customer acquisition cost is a lot smaller. The impact that you can do is significantly higher, and it's just easier to do it. And we've been sort of brainwashed, I think, for a whole generation of America, America, America. America is great, okay? But there are also other ways to get to America. And once you go to an A country with 100,000 users and real product market fit under your belt, then you can also enter that market in a different way. And one more point, if I may, I wanted just to make an example of what Cecile said earlier in the previous round, which was very interesting. One of our portfolio companies, C3, some of you may have heard of it. They're an AgTech drone-based data gathering system for not for crops but for trees, okay, for orchards, mainly oranges and stuff like that. They're very successful. They're doing a phenomenal job. But from day one, the point was we want to make an impact. We can really increase yield and really make a significant bite here in this business. And for a long time, they went to the executives in the ag business and they said all these nice things and they showed these great technologies. And it just didn't work, okay, because they were not listening. It was very interesting to watch the change over time when they started to tell the very same facts, just to present it in a different way. They'll say, okay, let's listen to you, Mr. I don't know, owner of 10 hectares in California doing oranges, or in Brazil or whatever. What are your problems? Well, I have this problem, this problem, this problem. And when they started to break that down and add metrics, and this is where Cecilia's point, I think, was very, very important. Add metrics to every single disease or problems or lack of irrigation or maybe too much irrigation or whatever the issue is, and connect dollars to that. All of a sudden, to make the commercial pitch was really making an impact pitch. And people reacted much, much better. The company exploded and is doing very well. So very, very interesting. Thank you for that, Cecile.
No, definitely. And, you know, I think that's also why we are here, to talk more about Israel, to talk more about Asia, you know, all this kind of maybe like B market that people know less, but where there are actually a lot of opportunities. So now we've been talking about startups scaling up, and Itai, you know, you bring actually corporates to Israel, you know, to work with all these tech companies. What trends actually are you seeing, and why do you think they are eager to work with, you know, this Israeli company?
So in Israel, we have, according to the last research that I'm familiar with, 536 multinationals actively looking for innovation, actively looking for the next ways. They want to put their hand on the next ways before their competitor does so. And actually you see multinationals coming from all, really any vertical, and because they can really find great solutions in Israel, in fintech, in agtech, in food tech, in whatever. And I think that the reason, one of the uniqueness of the Israeli ecosystem is the fact that even competitors partner with each other. I mean, there are many ecosystems around the world, there is in Singapore, in Hong Kong, of course in San Francisco. And in each and every ecosystem, you have many startups, and you have great investors, and you have great academy, and you have multinationals active, and you have really all the players. But what's really unique in Israel is the fact that all the ecosystem players are collaborating, even competitors. And thanks to that fact, all this ecosystem is moving much faster. Ariel has mentioned that in Israel, there is no 6 degrees of separation. Between one to another, I think there's maximum 1 person. And he's mentioned that it's thanks to the fact that we are small and everyone has served in the same units and learned in the same universities. But the uniqueness is that multinationals that are looking into solutions, into new technologies that will fit their challenges, can easily, really easily, much easier than in other ecosystems, find those startups, those entrepreneurs that will provide them with the correct solution that fits their specific needs. And it is also relatively easy in Israel to have a kind of DD on the entrepreneurs. Again, thanks to the fact that everyone knows everyone, you easily know whether you are facing one that is really a good entrepreneur with good background and recommendation, or a fake one. I mean, like in every place, you can also meet those that speak really nice, but don't really have the background that you expect them to have. So I think Israel is really a great place for multinationals, can easily find great solutions with great entrepreneurs, in many cases, serial entrepreneurs, and get a lot of value out of it. And there is a very interesting research done by SNC, Startup Nation Central, and the PwC. I think it was published like 6 or 12 months ago, sharing about the reason for those corporates coming to Israel and the benefit they get and their expectations. And you can absolutely see that it's only growing, the number of multinationals.
And Cecile, you know, we talked about impact investing, which you are focusing on, but as we said, you know, it's actually touching every sectors, and it should actually be considerate for like every company. So for your own investment, which sectors are you focusing on, and in which sector do you see the more adoption, I would say, for impact investment?
So that's an excellent question, and it gives me the opportunity to debunk a few truths. So people tend to think that when you're thinking about the impact that you make on society, on our planet, then you're talking about food tech, agri-tech, healthcare, but that's not true. Making an impact is a mindset. You can have an amazing cyber security company that keeps children safe online or keeps hospitals safe from hacking, which will be impact. You can have an amazing prop tech company that creates shared properties so that people can live better and have a better quality of life for them, and affordable housing. You can think of, I mean, pretty much everything. If you take out the companies that are out there to make people addicted to whatever, I don't know, pornography or you know, all these bad things on one hand, then basically you can have an impact on everything you do. All you need to do is think about what your product and business means to addressing stakeholder values, not only your shareholders, but who are your stakeholders? What are the outcomes that you expect, and what is your product or your solution going to create in terms of the outcomes? And then you can very easily embed the impact methodologies and the ESGs for sure, but also the SDGs into your business. So it's really about everyone. Number two, a truth that still some people hold, which I find very obscure, is that there is a compromise between making positive impact and making amazing profits and financial returns. It's quite the opposite. When you build a resilient company that employs the best people who never want to leave it and have a 30% increase in their productivity, and you have access to capital that nobody has access to, and your customers are more loyal to you because of the cause that you're serving and you're really addressing their needs, then you're making a much better financial result. So it's really not about compromise. at all, certainly not in high tech. So these are really the two major things I want to say. So look at your stakeholders, think about what you can do and what your product and business are doing to the planet and our society. Think about how to measure your impact in a professional way and accountable way. Look at the negative impact that you're creating and mitigate it, and look at the outcomes. Look always outcome based, and then get help. You know, we at the Global Impact Tech Alliance at GITA, we are providing the network for people to connect and also find information, databases, like, you know, we're data-driven entrepreneurs, data-driven investors. We want to see where the data is. We want to scale this market. We can connect with the relevant advisors who can advise the startups or advise the funds. Everybody should be making impact. And like Barak said, that's what the entrepreneurs want today. And certainly the young ones, when they come and pitch, they want to make an impact, and they want their investors to understand that and to be aligned with them. And they shouldn't have to hide the fact that they want to have a positive impact when they're doing their pitch to investors. So instead, let's all understand how we embed impact. My stepping into Pitango as a mainstream venture capital does not turn Pitango into an impact fund. Quite the contrary, it brings the impact into mainstream. And that's exactly where I was going. I've been in the impact space for almost 20 years now. And this is my personal passion. I believe that this is where we should all be going. I'm currently writing the playbook that is being used by Pitango, and I hope to share it with every investor who wants to be on this planet and do good and embed that into their mainstream investments. Happy to share that.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very clear, and it's true that it's a lot of myths that people think that you know, impact company cannot generate revenue. So I really hope that during this conference we manage to explain this really clearly. As we are, you know, almost at the end of the panel, you know, and you guys are really definitely full of passion, which we all like really here at Startup Impact Summit. I would like all of you to share, you know, less than like 30 seconds, if you can, really about your passion and what is driving you further. So what's next for you in terms of this passion that you have in you? Who would like to go first?
Ladies first, no?
I'll give the right to Ariel, who's been wanting to say something for a while.
Thank you, Cecile. No, I think we are, you know, it's amazing. For 45 minutes, we almost have not mentioned the word COVID, which is, I think, kudos to everybody. This is something important. We, as far as what's next, we cannot ignore the fact that we collectively have been run over by a truck, a colossal truck. Okay, humanity has been run over by a truck, and I think we have to look this in stride. This is, I think, a great opportunity to rethink a lot of things and to reprioritize a lot of things. If you recall, our PCM method starts with a problem, and we've been blessed now with many more problems. I'm not laughing. Finding a worthy problem is not as easy as it sounds. Solving it is a lot harder, okay? But just qualifying it, and certainly COVID, I think, qualifies for that. So we have now new opportunity to get back some liberties and some things that we used to take for granted, and now maybe we appreciate more. So we have a lot of more work to do.
And that's the entrepreneurial spirit, you know, find like right problems to solve. I think that's really one of the key things. Barak, what about you?
Yeah, well, I think I can summarize that what brings the people on this panel together, that all of us are getting into the office in the morning smiling because we are in the right industries and we are doing, you know, our slogan is helping the human condition. It was created 15 years ago with the word impact, I think, was not in the vocabulary back then. So this is one thing. And the second thing, at least for us, and Ariel switched us to the COVID, and I must say that I think it was the first video that I had for a long time that the word was not used in the first 10 minutes. So for us, you know, we are in medical and we are in ag tech and food tech. Those industries are very related to things that we need to do better now that we understand that we are living with Corona. So for us, it makes our life even more interesting and trying to find more solutions that will help the human condition.
Itai?
My passion is really to help those traditional corporations change their DNA and get it updated to the updated challenges. Of course, after the COVID-19, it's even more challenging. Just to see this transformation, changing their mindset, not relying anymore only on their internal capabilities, open their arms, open the ears and the eyes, and getting prepared to collaborating, to partnering with others, not concentrating only internally. This is my passion.
And, you know, to make a little bit of a change, instead of having women's first, I would like to have the woman on the panel for the last word.
Thank you. So my passion really is to bring technology to make good, to do good and change the world. And I have to add the sense of urgency. We don't have time. We don't have time. Our children will not forgive us if we don't do something now. It's already too late. We all have to step in and not forget about who we were before, but instead go forward. Let's not go back. Let's go forward into thinking how technology can blend into creating huge impact on society and our planet. And let's do it now. That's my passion.
That's perfect. Let's all move forward. I want really to thank you all for your energy, for your passion. That was really, really great talking to you all. So thank you very much.